Welcome to session 6AZ, Database DevOps for Db2 and IMS from Steve Solomon. And if you do have any questions, please pop them into the chat and Steve will take them as and when a pause allows. So thank you, Steve. Take it away.
Thank you, everybody. Good day. We were talking about the pictures where I live in Arizona, and that is a picture of my home state, the Sonoran Desert. So we're going to jump right into it. Today's topic is DevOps for IMS and DB2, and it's literally how to bring your DBAs and your database changes into a modern DevOps tool chain. So how do you integrate those processes? So that's what we're going to cover today, and how can they integrate them, and what is the state of the database DevOps market for the mainframe? And I think you guys are all going to be surprised. So first of all, baseline, we always have to start off with what is DevOps. It is a business-driven approach for delivering customer value using agile methods, collaboration, and automation. And automation is part of that key. So now, as we go forward, what doesn't it say? It doesn't say that things should be left out of it. So for database DevOps, then why don't we take that and take the thoughts that we're using to automate agile software development and add that to database change? That's an amazing idea, right? Why aren't we doing this earlier? It has to do with the groups that we're automating. But when you start to think about, okay, I've got some agile development, I've got some automation right tools, what about applying database changes? It makes a tremendous amount of sense, and we're starting to see a big uptake in the market for that. And customers either building their own homegrown solutions or using commercial solutions, and we'll cover a couple of those. So the things to ask yourself is, how much faster can you go in terms of velocity, quality, and efficiency if you incorporate your database changes and you tie them into your software chain into a modern DevOps tool chain? So when we started down this journey as BMC 2 years ago, we've been doing these surveys of our customers for years. In fact, this year was the 15th annual survey. And we started asking customers, okay, well, what are you really doing with DevOps on the mainframe, and how does it apply to databases? And you know what? There was very distracted results. As a matter of fact, very few customers at the time responded that they were using DevOps practices on the mainframe. Well, this survey that completed just a few months ago, which is available, you can use that link and download your own copy. I highly recommend you read it, share it with your management. It's a good survey, and it shows the commitment to the mainframe, but it shows some outstanding changes in the market for the mainframe. So what are companies looking for? They're looking for that ability to provide changes faster. 78% cite the ability to adapt to demands. It's agility, right? How do we drive change faster? But what was really amazing with mainframe, again, that's 56%. We are over the hump. There is no more question. Are we using DevOps on the mainframe? It is empirical. We are, with more than half of the customers responding to the survey adopting that practice. Now, it was very, very interesting also because before we would get a split of execs and technical people, but this one was really interesting because the executives report that 70%, 77% of them report that they are using DevOps practices and will continue to go forward. So as we mentioned, it is widespread. There is a lot of different DevOps tools out there, and there's a lot of places to start. But really the wow factor in our recent survey, 74% say that once they adopt DevOps, they start seeing an ROI in 1 year or sooner. As a technology and a deployment where you can invest in something and see the benefit in 1 year and then capitalize on that year after year after year, that is just huge. So the market's changing. DevOps is here. It is adopted on the mainframe side. What else did we see in this survey? That the rate of database changes is increasing. So we keep hearing about the mainframe being legacy, and I don't use that word. I use the word legendary. It's a legendary platform that we've been building applications on, and the stuff I wrote 20 years ago is still providing value today. As a matter of fact, we started seeing some mainframe modernization, which translated into vendors saying, let us help you lift and shift off the mainframe. Now we're seeing mainframe modernization as, how do we modernize development on the mainframe and get more out of our mainframe? How do we get more through and more value in our mainframe? So the whole discussions, the marketing messages from some of the vendors out there is changing. So take a look at that, and I think if you're Z people, you're going to think that's very, very positive. So 53% of our survey respondents that there is an increased rate of database object change. So application changes are definitely going up, and 44% that the number of databases in their environment continues to increase. Okay, so now we're driving change. We're driving software. We're driving database changes, but our maintenance windows are continuing to shrink. Our 24/7 by 365 is a reality. So how do we then apply the changes? Well, that's where we also need automation, because if you're going to have a change window, you want to make sure that when you apply that change, it's not the first time that change has ever ran. You want to make sure that it is tested in a test environment, including updating tables, and it is fully automated, so your change window is as small as possible. One, to get your production back up, and two, let's say that you take 10 minutes out of an hour change window, that gives you 50 minutes to recover if something bad happens. So there's a lot of good things that can come from database automation. Now, Database DevOps, how does it play? Is there products out there? I've never heard of it before. Well, one of the charts that I like to use is from Digital AI. This is a great chart. I advise you guys go pull this down yourself, take a look at what they have on their site. They're not related to BMC. They are a partner of our copyware peers that Stuart is from, but just a great group of people. And it is an innovative way to look at what's out there. So if we look at this center orange column, we're going to see database DevOps tools. There are already database DevOps tools out there in the distributed market for managing change. And it's not real easy to see, but number 84 on the list, DB Maestro, actually does DB2 changes on the mainframe also. So we're starting to see that in the distributed space take over. And as a matter of fact, when we look at this table and you think, oh, it's just distributed tools. No, I went through and I started poking at all the tools that we use on the mainframe for mainframe automation today. And as a matter of fact, two of them with the gold arrows are mainframe centric DevOps tools. So this chart isn't limited to just distributed development. It is a table of DevOps tools that are out there. Now, is it all of them? No. You could probably fill up this chart 3 times over with all the tools that are out there. These are the ones that are voted on by the communities and the users as the most used, most liked. So keep that in mind when you go take a look at that. So now you take all your disparate tools, how do we integrate them into a DevOps tool chain so that the processes are integrated and automated? Remember, automation is a key part of DevOps. So when we look at that, and this came from our peers at CompuWare, it is how do we take a look at what is a modern software development DevOps tool chain for the mainframe. And this is one way to visualize it. So one of the things that I do recommend you do is in your company, figure out what tools you're using. And I guarantee you every team is going to be different. I've been in lots of different mainframe shops over the years, and I don't know any two divisions that use all the same tools. And usually on teams, depending on where they came from and then where the history of the people are, they use different tools also. So what you do is you start with your teams, the ones you're looking to automate, draw yourself a map, draw yourself a tool chain. How do these things work? Now, you're not always going to have integration arrows. Maybe you're going to have Jira, and Jira doesn't necessarily integrate with some of the other tools that you have. That's just fine. You can use them in parallel. There are some things like test case management where maybe Jira is automated. So not everything is going to have an automated link. So draw out your map, draw out your arrows. What is the process that you follow? What are the tools that you have? And then start looking for integration and automation opportunities. So when you're looking at that, just keep this in mind that database DevOps should be part of it, because when we're looking at dev, test, QA, and prod down at the bottom, we're looking at how do we move database changes through that life cycle. Also, there are things that you can use like COPE. COPE is an IMS virtualization tool. One of the problems we've had on the mainframe is how do we get more test environments? And IBM has come out with ZD&T, and they're working on Ansible to provision more environments. But COPE is one of those things where you can virtualize IMS testing environments on the mainframe. Then what you have is more testing environments. You have more configuration drift, more things to manage, but you can drive your changes faster if you can have testing isolation and promotion environments. And that's a great way that you could do that. I used that technology myself when I was a programmer, and it saved us a tremendous amount of time. So with DB2, it's much easier to create clones with different high-level qualifiers, either in the same DB2 or different ones. And what happens is then we get multiple test areas used by multiple different teams, and work collates through the process for databases. So just keep in mind when you're drawing out your tools, look and see what you're using for your application source change and your database change. And I will also tell you that schedule changes for your workload automation tool can follow the same type of life cycles and automation. So one other item to consider is if you're doing a lot of job schedule changes and you want to add them into your software change management process, you certainly can. Now, database DevOps. This is going to be a little bit challenging at first because it's a culture change. Agile DevOps is a culture change more than automation often. And what happens is you have to understand what are the motivations and the goals that you have on the different folks. So we have our application developers and architects. They have a need for speed, right? Because they've got the business pushing down on them saying, I need this, this, and this. I'm a product manager. I do that to my application development teams. I'm saying, hey, I need this feature, this feature, this feature. I don't need this feature next April. I need it in January. I do that to my teams on a regular basis. So they have pressure from folks like me to drive them fast. My operation side, my DBA, they have a different value chain. They prioritize stability and quality. They want to make sure that our velocity is provided at what is called the right rate of change, which means it's not disruptive, that we're doing good changes and we're not going too fast, that we're making all kinds of mistakes. Automation can help you then deploy those changes with high quality and with agility. You just have to understand the different cultures and who's going to be doing what. So when we take a look at a standard application software development lifecycle change, what does our developer do? They have immense amount of power and authority over all software, right? You can go check it out of your repository, be it ChangeMan, Endeavor, ISPW, Git, whatever your source is. They can make all the changes. They can compile and build it and put it into a test environment, and they're ready to go. But what happens now? How many of these changes now require a database change? I need a new column. I need to expand a column. So I worked a lot in my career with Db2, vSAM, and flat files. I didn't even think anything about putting in a change for a flat file or a vSAM to upgrade it. When I first started with Db2, I was using version 1.3. I had full ability to create my own tables in the lowest level development environment. I would go create them. I would go update them. And it was when I was getting ready to promote them to the next level that I would actually go talk to a DBA. So you have this complete control. So from a developer point of view, I can check out source. If there's no database change, I can move it into unit test. I can move it into systems test. I can move it into acceptance test. And then I can get approval through my change management process, whether you're using a service test change management or a different change management, whatever it is for changes, whether it's a standard change or a complex change, and automatically promote it into production. All right, so how does this change in today's world? And this is where the complexity comes in that we think by automation we can avoid. All right, so this is database changes, no DevOps. So I have my application developer. I've created my software change. I need to add a column. I need to expand a column. Worse, maybe let's say I'm doing something in my table that's going to require that the table is dropped and recreated. Okay, that means that there's a lot of other things that have to happen. It means that I have to go out and I have to rebind packages. I have to regrant authorizations. There's a lot of dependent tasks when you do that. So an alter is the simplest thing. An alter is add a column, expand a column, things like that. There may be that you do something and it puts your table in pending status and it has to run a reorg before it applies. So there is intelligence that is required. This is where the DBA shine, right? They come in and they say, hey, this is what the changes you want to make. This is what we're going to do. And they're going to apply it. Right now, in most of the mainframe shops, I've been working with DBAs control all changes to DB2 tables. In some of the development shops that are embracing Agile, and some of those teams that have distributed teams doing DB2 development on the mainframe, they're actually allowing their developers to create tables in the lowest level. Not saying that you have to for database DevOps, but it certainly speeds up the development process, because what happens now is, as the developer, I need a database change. I go out and I create a request for my DBA. All is good. He has a 3-day service level agreement, or SLA. He goes out, he comes back. Okay, Steve, you asked for X, Y, and Z, but you really needed to do A and B also. So I've done these 5 changes. Here you go. I'm in development. I'm working away. I build my test cases. All right, I'm good. Now I'm ready as an application developer to test with the rest of my team in unit test. So now all I really want to do is promote my changes, and my software promotion to unit test is really easy and fully automated. But now I've got to go back to the DBA and I've got to go back and create another record and say, okay, we're now ready to apply those changes and have them move from dev to unit test. All right, fine. It takes him 2 more days. He applies them in unit test. I'm ready to go. I'm running my unit test. The same cycle repeats to go to system test. Really, if there is a 3-day service level agreement on this entire process, just to get from development to acceptance test, you're looking at 9 days of embedded wait time, possibly, for a change. So if we can take that out, if we can automate it, if we can give guide rails an automation process so that we can do a high quality job and do the things that DBA would have done manually, maybe what we can do is automate that process so the DBAs provide a higher value guidance process rather than the tedious work of applying changes. Now, definitely when we get to to prod, your DBAs want to be in control of that, right? Because there's a lot of things that happen in the prod environment, and that is the precious castle on the hill that we're trying to defend. So we want to make sure that they're fully involved, that all of your backups, your reorgs, your coordination, your upstream, downstream validation is all part of it. So we're not saying about taking the DBAs out of the process. We're actually saying, what if we use automation to have the DBAs and the developers work together at the lowest level, the development environment? This is where they go do the changes, because I hate to say it, when I was a programmer, I didn't issue one request for a change in the development environment. I would go work on my program and I would say, oh, for the DBA, I need this column, this column, this column. And then I'd be working away and I go, dang, I got to make another change to that because I need another column because I need a foreign key to this other table so I can go reference this other table. And then I'd have to go through that change and do that testing. Then I'd realize, you know what? My format of my fields between this system, this system, this system is different. So I need to make them the same. I would go back to the DBA again and again. Well, that's where you should be working with the DBA. The DBA should be helping you, guide you in creation of those tables in test and making sure they're good to go. But now once you're ready to go to unit test, it shouldn't have to be a request for you of a ticket for the DBA to apply those and have to go do it all manually. What if we just compare the difference between the development environment and the unit test environment, generate the changes and automatically apply them, much like we do a software change. So in several different mainframe software change environments, you can promote a change or a change package. It will look at the target environment that you're going to, and it will say, oh, these other things may conflict with this promotion. The same kind of thing we can do here going from dev to unit test is, what's the difference between the environments? What's the difference between my tables? And let's automatically go ahead and promote up the changes. It's pretty easy to say this column exists in the development environment. It doesn't exist in unit test. Let's go ahead and create an alter command and then run that against unit test. That's a great simplified automation. It gets a little more difficult, as I say, if you're going to drop a table and you're going to recreate it and rebuild it in the unit test environment, then you have to make sure that all of that automation is part of it. Now, we do the same thing. We repeat it again as we go to systems test and then to acceptance test. And then once again, this is where the huge value comes in. We've tested our automated change process as we went from unit test to system test to acceptance test. So we should have tested our promotion process somewhere around 3 times. Now, it's not always going to be the same because things change along the way. Maybe we go from dev to unit test 5 times and unit test to system test 3 times and system test to acceptance test 2 times. So when we do this, it's not always a 1-1-1. It could be 20 times we did promotions for these changes coming through. But we want to make sure is we've tested our software change, we've tested our change apply process for the software, and also the database update process. So if this is all automated, it's been proven out, when you go to run in production as an automated process, you should be very, very confident of a high quality change deployment success. So all good stuff. So when we start looking at this, it's really that change automation that is really going to multiply our ability and be a force multiplier to help with that velocity. It also helps with quality because we find out process errors in deployments and updates earlier in the life cycle. So remember, we're looking for quality, velocity, efficiency, and that all adds up to improved agility.
Steve,
Yes.
there's no questions in the chat, but I have a question. What
Please.
do you do about segregation of duties then, in terms of, is there, I know you're talking about on the left-hand side, but is there a need for, beyond the QAing of the change, is there a need to limit access to these databases somewhere? I'm
Absolutely.
naive with
Absolutely.
this.
And so what you want to make sure in your database DevOps solution that you build in segregation of duties. So it could be in a more modern development lifecycle where the developers have access to create their tables in the lowest level in development, but they don't in unit test, system test, acceptance test, definitely not prod, right? It could be that we're running out of where most of the mainframe shops that I visit is where the DBAs control all of the development. So really then it requires somebody with authority to oversee the process. We could deploy the change with a user ID that has access to, say, unit test, that has access to the tables. If we generate that automation, we can have it submitted by a DBA so they can overview the process, or we can have it happen as part of an automated change once the confidence level is built up. So what we don't want in our tools is that we're necessarily going to give full reigning control to our app dev folks, because the DBAs, remember that culture change, they still have to have that stability, protection, quality features. So definitely we tailor it to the right person. But the big difference is the DBA now is saying, okay, I know what this is, I see what the change is, we've reviewed this, now I approve it, and then it automatically happens. Now, when we get down to prod, typically acceptance tests, the DBAs are over that. I've also worked with shops where DBAs, they had separate DBA teams. There was a database DBA team for application development. That's going to be on the left-hand side. And there would be a separate team that does production. So that kind of segregation of duties can also and should be also implementable via a database DevOps tool. Make sense, Stuart?
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So that's not the biggest problem we have to see. So if you're on a CI/CD team, if you're on a DevOps team, if you have an automation team, and actually the biggest problem we have is configuration drift. What does that mean? And what are some of the options that we can take a look at that? So I actually pulled a slide from DB Maestro. Remember, they were on that slide of the database tool chain options. And DB Maestro is a tool where you can create your databases and then you can generate the DDL and have it done, created for you. It's used in the distributed world. They have a solution for Db2. And they do a survey of their customers, much like the BMC survey, and this is one of their slides from their deck. So I do recommend that you go take a look at their product, pull down this survey, and so that they can get some credit for it, because when I was looking for configuration drift surveys and feedback, this survey jumped out at me that the number one problem we have in this automation, and they've been doing it in the distributed space for some time, is configuration drift. And what do we mean by that? What we mean is we have lots of different test environments. So when I mentioned if you were using COPE for IMS, you may have 10 different versions of test databases that you're using so you can segregate your development teams. Well, I love this quote. This is not an American saying, by the way, route to live. I got it from a UK customer, and I use it because my route to live, when we were looking at the previous example, was dev 1 to stage 1 to QA to prod. So if I'm automatically deploying changes from dev 1 to stage 1 to from QA to prod, sooner or later, I've got to go update the other 4 testing environments. Because what happens is this quickly is going to run into configuration drifts. So if I'm doing different teams and they're doing development, and I'm working in dev 1, Stuart's out there working in dev 2, Dijon gets a fix and he has to do a table change as part of the fix and promote it up the life cycle, these things are going to get out of sync. And so what we need a way to do is to visualize what is in sync, what is out of sync, and what are the differences. Because when I'm in dev 1, dev 2, it's highly likely that my test tables are going to be different. Now, when I promote them up to stage 1 and stage 2, it could be the same. I could have multiple projects that are working together, that are coming together in this environment. And so I have to know when to deploy those changes. But somewhere along the way, when I get to prod, I need to apply the changes everywhere. So we're not talking about taking DDL and running it once, right? If I have a simple process, there are 8 different environments on this screen. So I need to apply those changes 8 different times. So it's configuration drift, and how do we manage that? So what have we been doing so far on the mainframe? Number one, no database automation. We've been keeping this up to the DBAs. We go create a ticket. We want to have tables created, a WXX 830 employee table, the department table. I go have them created. I work with them. I'm ready to go up to stage 1. I go back to my DBAs, just as we mentioned. What did we try some some things. We tried doing DDL via the SCM systems. So like an ISPW and Endeavor, a changeman. So for anybody who knows my background, I worked with changeman for like 14 years. I can't tell you how many discussions I had with customers of changeman about applying DDL changes as part of their changeman ZMF change packages. I never got any acceptance out of that because the DBAs didn't want to be bound by that. They were also not okay, not just being able to jump into a tool and making a change or issue an alter on the fly. So some companies have done some homegrown solutions. Pardon me, I'm getting a horse in my throat. Is that what you say in the UK, a horse? All right. So you can do it. And I've talked to some companies that have done some integrations where they're deploying their database changes with their software change management. They're using the automation from their software change management to deploy the changes. That is great if you can get your DBAs to adopt that process and work in that paradigm. They usually don't because of number 3. And this is where they're using very high-powered tools written specifically for DBAs on the mainframe. BMC has one for IMS, one for Db2 called Change Manager for Db2, Change Manager for IMS. CA/Broadcom has their RC products. IBM has their admin products. And these things are tailored for DBAs to make changes with quality, fast on the fly. But if I wanted to go in and I wanted to go to stage 1 and I wanted to add a column, more than likely a DBA is going to go into a tool. They're going to issue an alter command against that table, and voila, my column is there. If they're applying something that needs to have a table dropped and recreated, Change Manager for IMS, Change Manager for Db2, they figure that all out. These are all the same. They look at it and they say, this change is going to impact this. And they will generate what's called a work list or a set of JCL jobs to go redo that. So if I drop the table, I create the table. Maybe I had to unload the table. So then I drop it, create it, reload the table, regrant authorizations, look for my referential integrity triggers, all of that kind of stuff. And so everything that you have to do to apply a change is generated for them. So for them, that's pretty much what they need. However, it's really when we get to step 4 that things become interesting. And this is what I would call database DevOps via a modern tool chain. This is where we can start taking those tools from 2 and 3 and blending them together with modern DevOps tool chains automation such as Jenkins, IBM Urban Code Deploy, HCL Launch, or XL Release, where we can bring all of this stuff together and automate it. And by the way, this should work if you're doing IMS deployments and IMS changes. You should consider what you're doing with IMS. Maybe you're not going to do as much. It depends on your rate of change. So typically when I work with customers, Db2 rated change is their number 1 priority, and making sure that it's done right and making sure that the SQL changes in your applications don't cause performance problems. So we tend to look at source, we tend to look at database, and we tend to look at SQL and SQL performance. What do we need to do to change as a whole? If you're an IMS folks and you're an IMS DBA, then what our IMS for Db2 tool will do is what other competitors I'm sure are doing is it will look at the organization. It will look what will happen. If you're an IMS and you need to update a segment, you can regen this segment. You can redo your DBG gens, your PSB gens, ACB gens if it's an online transaction, all automatically. So really what we're saying is when we do a database change, there's a lot of dependent things that need to happen to make sure that your system is up and usable. So why not use technology to automatically determine those dependent items? That way you don't have to worry about the expertise of your DBA, especially if your IMS DBAs are as old as I am, and we're starting to transition. The DBAs that have only never worked with Db2 now need to maintain IMS as well. So there is another reason for automation and advanced tools. So everything we're talking about here applies equally to Db2 or to IMS. That you need to have the intelligence and the automation. Now, you may not fully automate your IMS changes as part of a DevOps tool chain, because if you're not doing that many, right, it doesn't make sense to automate something you do in 5 times a year. It does make sense to automate 100%, something you're doing weekly or every other week. And so as we automate our agile process, look at your rate of change, look where automation will be a benefit. By the way, look at your process. Don't just automate what is there. I mean, a lot of times we did change management processes, and change management processes got built up over time because something bad happened. So Joe put a change into production, it caused a problem. So we instituted a rule that said whatever Joe did, he's not going to do that anymore. We're going to have segregation of duty. Now I've got Joe and Barb, right? So then Joe and Barb work on a change, they deployed into production, and it caused a scheduling problem for another application. So now we said, okay, we're not going to do that anymore. So now we have Joe and Barb, and we have Raju in the scheduling department, because now we've got to schedule the change and go through a change advisory board. What happens with changes over time is the processes get complex. If you automate a bad process, you get a faster bad process. So look at the process, look what you really need, look at your automation. And if some of those checks and balances and controls can be put in the automation, maybe you won't have to do them as part of your change management process. So Stuart and I were talking a few weeks ago, and we were talking about ITIL standard changes versus complex changes and what has to go through a change advisory board. So if these are simple changes, you're adding a column, it's going through the life cycle, maybe in your change management process, it can be fully automated. Other things that are much more complex, maybe you need to put a hook in to create a service desk ticket so that it goes through your change control review board. So make sure that you look at your process, but it helps to draw out that tool chain. And our friends, Craig, that's a peer of Stuart's, will literally has charts that allow people to draw out the process and add how many days it takes in each process, so they can see what the automation savings will be. So there's some great things that we can do, but take a look at that, because really what we want to do is get to item number 5 here, is how do we integrate software and database changes into the same DevOps process? And don't forget, we can also do schedule changes at the same time. So I can do complete changes to my production environment, completely automated, completely tested before I get deployed into production, which gives us that high level quality. And it allows us to go faster. Change management processes are interesting, and I like to relate to them as brakes on a car. Do brakes on a car slow you down, or do they allow you to go faster? They allow you to go faster. They allow you to drive safer. So if you think about it that way, those brakes in your car allow you to go fast when you can go fast, and allow you to slow down when you need to slow down. So think of it that way as you do your automation, is when you're building that out and people say, oh, I don't want to change because I've always done it this way. It's more like brakes on a car. Yeah, but you've been driving maybe without brakes in your car. What if we put them on there? Can't you go faster doing the things that you typically do and in the long runs? And then we can drive slower and controlled where we have curves and things are more difficult. So as we start looking through the processes, so what do we need to do? The first thing is figure out what you got. And I guarantee you that's not going to be an easy task. So map out your DevOps toolchain, figure out if you can do what we call POA, or point of arrival. What are the standards we want to use? What are you using for automation? So we talk to folks. Jenkins is ubiquitous, right? So almost all of the DevOps tool chains are going to have a Jenkins integration, and they're going to have webhooks for Jenkins. So, if there's a bunch of different standards, you have some folks using IBM Urban Code Deploy, some that are taking a look at Ansible. It's okay to start with Jenkins because it's kind of ubiquitous. It's a great place to start. If you look at the solutions that are out there on the marketplace, almost all of them will have Jenkins plugins and plugin hooks. It's a great place to start. So look at what your tool chain is. Look at what your automation options are, right? And then start figuring out where you can build them in together. I will also tell you that some of the best teams that I've seen deploy this have a dedicated CI/CD team or DevOps team. You also see this as a tools team. So if you look at a scaled agile framework environment, they'll have a tools team. This is the team that's responsible for tools and processes. This is not the same team that's typically your project management office. Your project management office is usually trying to keep track of stuff and report it to management. What you really want is you want to have a team that works for your application development teams that supports their tools and supports your developers. So if your developer has a great idea for an integration between the tools, it's better to have a DevOps tool team or a CI/CD team that can go deploy that automation. And what makes it really cool is that team should scale that across all the other teams in your environments. So if you do DevOps by team, and you've got a Scrum team and it's got 9 people, and one of them does your DevOps toolchain. Let's say they spend 50% of their time on that. They go through and say, this is a great idea. You know what we're going to do? We're going to deploy Sonar Cube, and we're going to do code quality as part of our modern DevOps toolchain. By the way, that is really, really common and highly recommended because it gives you code quality assurance. But if I do it for my one team, I only benefit 9 of us, right? If I have a centralized CI/CD team, I do that, and I have 10 Scrum teams. Now I've been a, there's 10 times 9, there's 90 of us that benefit. So the return on investment for deploying DevOps tools is much, much higher when you have a centralized team that's applying those changes for the benefits of everybody in your development environment. Maybe that's your automated testing also. So maybe that we're running a lot of automated testing and each team does testing differently. Well, what if we standardize that and we put it in the DevOps toolchain? Because really, the ultimate DevOps toolchain says, go check out my source, check in my source, and everything happens automatically. It goes through, it gets built, compiled, linked, it gets deployed to test, and then I submit my full test suite. So maybe that's going to be some manual jobs. Maybe it's going to be a workflow and a workload scheduling tool, a WLA workload automation tool. So maybe I have 10 jobs. I have to simulate production in my acceptance test. Well, when I moved into my acceptance test, why not after I've built my change, I've deployed my database, right? Because you've got to do your database changes for DB2 first, IMS also. And you've got to make sure those changes are there, because when your software goes to deploy to that area, if it's a DB2 change, your binds will fail if the tables don't have the columns there. So just think about the order that you're doing things and think about doing it for your full environment. Number 2 is, let's talk about what database is fit. Now, there are more mainframe databases out there than IMS and DB2. So that's what the other is. Maybe you have some IDMS or some Datacom or some other things that are out there in the mainframe world from days gone by. But take a look, which ones have our greatest rate of change? Typically, it's DB2 these days, as we see more and more development focus on that platform. But take a look at it and see what is core to your environment. Take a look and see if you've had any bumps in the road. Have you had any deployments that have not gone well? Usually that's a motivation for management to invest in automation. And then start taking a look at where you can fit that into your environment and how that would work for you. Leverage the BMC 2020 mainframe survey. This is a great survey. It is generic. It is available for everybody. As a matter of fact, IBM cited it yesterday in their presentation. It shows the value of the mainframe and the commitment to the mainframe going forward. This will help you get management backing to develop DevOps, to deploy tools so that you can go faster on your mainframe environment, get more value out of your mainframe. And then database DevOps methodology. This is going to be very different depending on what you already have in place and or your in-house methodology. I was at one large shop. They like to develop their own tools. So instead of buying commercial tools, I'm a commercial vendor, right? They like to build it themselves. Okay, that's fine. That's their methodology for building it. They go, these are the top 10 problems that we have. We're going to go fix the top 3. Let's go build for that. And away they go. And then they can use continuous improvement. That's a great way to do that too. If you look at commercial vendors, we all have different methodologies. So BMC has a methodology about moving changes from dev to test to prod. The IBM solution is out there as a solution where you can create your DDL, put it in a repository of Git, and have a complete control and move it through the lifecycle, and it's all API driven, so you can add any kind of automation you want. So your solution there is very, very different. The one that Broadcom was showing recently looks to be kind of more similar to BMC, but I'm not an expert on their solution. So when you look at your DevOps methodology, look at the tools that you have, look at how you guys typically do automation and CI/CD work, and then you can start figuring out how to draw that in and what methodology you want to work. Number 5, don't underestimate agile culture change. This is often more difficult. So I've had the opportunity to go through agile transformations with lots of different teams across 3 different companies. And I will tell you that culture is the #1 challenge, that there's always a lot of resistance to change. And so don't be shy about it. Go out and state the reasons why you're doing it. Take a look at it. And the way to overcome that is number 6, start small. So as I've applied software change management best practices across multiple companies, I will usually look for a team that is willing to change and is willing to take it on and to take a look at that and invest in that for the betterment of the company. So I start with them, automate them. Then we make them a showcase and we talk about what they've done, what they've accomplished, what their rate of change has improved, their defects have gone down. If you're in-house and you're in-house development. You can look at a trend called escaped defects, which means defects that are reported from production. If you're a commercial vendor like myself, we tend to call that customer found defects or CFDs. You can look at those rates and then you can message that. By making that team successful, then you can start more easily going through the culture change. It will be a culture change. If you go to your DBA team and say, we're going to apply these tools, there's going to be a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So say, hey, look, we're going to do some automation. We're going to make you the managers of the change. We're going to try to take the tedious stuff that is just tedious, that doesn't have value, automate that. Let's have you use your brain to do the smarter things, the dependencies, the complex changes, what does it mean if we change this to a PBR2 type table in DB2? What does that mean for our backups? What's our recoveries? Things that drive the business forward. That is how you're successful. Start small, get some successes, message it, and have a centralized automation team, and database DevOps will be something that you can incorporate in your environment. How did we get here and why now? So it was really very interesting in the history of CompuWare and BMC. So you guys should be aware that we recently came together. CompuWare is always focused on DevOps. BMC, we've been more on the operation side. We've been that steady state quality, protect the production environment type guys. The CompuWare guys have been the, hey, let's get some rate of change. Let's get our tools automated. Let's get them integrated, get that deployment. We've started to come together, just like we're asking customers to say, look, how can we take the best out of what we're doing in mainframe DevOps automation with everything we're doing in operations for monitoring, changing, and how do we tie that all together? So for us, it's been a great success. Stuart, by the way, comes from the CompuWare family. I'm from the BMC side. We are new peers, and we're still in that merging process, but we do believe that by having that focus, that Dev and Ops coming together is really what everybody needs to do in the environment. I think you'll see the same messaging out of Broadcom. You'll see the same thing out of IBM, that as we do mainframe modernization, this whole end-to-end process, what do we really want to do? We want to focus on that quality, velocity, and efficiency. And there's all these different things that we can do as part of the process. So I'm excited to be part of the mainframe journey. I think I'm probably more excited now than I have been in the past 10 years as we've seen the mainframe change, but we're seeing lots of growth, and it's an exciting time to be a mainframer. What I did do is I collected a few notes on the previous presentations. If you say we don't do agile on the mainframe and my team says it'll never work, you definitely have to go get Yulia's session 2AS. So they've been doing DevOps on the mainframe. I think Yulia is one of the brightest minds in mainframe DevOps that's out there today. She's from EMEA Mixed, I believe. So definitely go look at her presentation. If you're a share member, go back and look at what they've done in her previous share presentation where she won a speaker reward. So things that you can do. I love their attitude, because if they look at it and say it should be automated, their answer is why not, and go do it. Jenkins for the mainframe, I mentioned that earlier. So Jorn put together a great session for Jenkins on the mainframe for DBAs. I thought it was amazing because he does so much where he automates a lot of his tedious tasks. So actually Jorn is from Rocket, and he has 100 different DB2 environments, or so he says, and he has to apply the same change over time. If you have to apply the same change multiple times, that's where automation comes in. There are some great suggestions for automating with Jenkins, not just for database DevOps or for other DevOps, for automating other changes you might have. I did mention Julia's session, which is Broadcom has announced a DB2 DevOps solution. So they are now in the database DevOps market. So please go take a look at that. If you're a Broadcom RC customer, you might want to go take a look at that and consider if you want to use that as a base for your DevOps solution. The last session that I'd like to highlight is my peer Marcus's from our BMC DB2 team. Accessing DB2 from the back door is what the session is called. But I changed it to from USS because I think if you leverage Jenkins and USS and automation, you'll begin to really open up to the power of how using Jenkins with mainframe and change and software and database can really generate some huge ROI for your environment. So in addition to database DevOps, take a look at this because there's nothing standalone on the mainframe, right? Everything is kind of interrelated. So your DevOps tools are based on Agile typically and small units of work and deployment. You know, we automate that typically with Jenkins or a tool like IBM Urban Code Deploy. You know, what are we doing? We're leveraging tools in the mainframe, we're building our own, and how can we do it in the capabilities? So I think I have come to the end of my prepared notes, and hopefully I haven't spoken too fast for my peers, because uh, I get going and I tend to forget that not everybody is native English speakers. So
You
questions.
certainly do. You do run at the red line on the pace, but fabulous content. Thank you very much, Steve. There is a question, interesting question, from a newbie IMS DBA. What's the
Yes.
future of the mainframe? Is it going away soon? Can I expect I will have a job available in mainframe for the next 5 to 10 years?
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, number one, take the link, go get the BMC annual survey. I think that will waive a lot of your fears. Number two is IMS is not going away. Look at the number of transactions that are still running on IMS. It is amazing. Now, are we seeing the rate of change as in DB2? Not necessarily. So one of the great things that I learned from my new peers at CompuWare is their slogan is to be your partner for the next 50 years. To me, that is eye-opening, but it puts a stake in the ground on how long they expect the mainframe environment to be there and to be good partners for the customers. So IMS is in use. You will find out that probably that skill is going to be in high demand, because a lot of the IMS folks are as old as me and they have the gray hair like I do. So it's becoming more and more in demand, and people that can transition and support DB2 and IMS are going to be highly, highly valued. So as I also mentioned, I don't see the mainframe going away. I do see people consolidating down if they're small IMS shops. So if you're a DBA in a small IMS shop, you want to expand your skills maybe in a DB2 also. If you're in a large IMS shop, I think you should be confident, because the studies that have come out about what it takes to migrate apps off the mainframe are now coming all out and saying it's not worth it. IDC did a recent survey and customers have regretted their lift and shift mentality. And I think that's part of the reason that we're seeing that change. I can tell you, as a mainframe vendor, I'm a product manager, right? I'm responsible for the revenue for my product lines. I go out there and I look at how much attrition we have. I've been a product manager in the mainframe space for more than 20 years, 3 different companies. Um, and we focused on the attrition, and we would go quarterly, who was leaving the mainframe and what would the expected losses be. I don't do that today. I'm looking at the customers that I have and how to best serve my customers this year, next year, and the year after. And so my personal experience, I've seen less attrition in the last 2 years than I had previously in, say, the 5 to 8 years before that. So my view of the mainframe, this is Steve speaking, not BMC, is that you'll have a good life for quite a while. I've been in the mainframe market since 1985. It has produced a great quality life for my family, and I hope it will do the same, and that you'll have a great mainframe career.
And
Long answer, Stuart, sorry.
yeah, no, great answer. I'd also add that always ask why people are doing what they're doing in your IMS area, because if the answer is that's the way we've always done it, maybe it's an opportunity for you as a newbie to bring your knowledge, your perspective to the job, because the way you solve a problem today might not be the way that people were solving problems 5, 10, 15 years ago. So don't be afraid to ask why. Do we do it like this? Because, as Steve said, the architecture, the mainframe is here to stay, but you definitely want to keep it as modern and fresh as you possibly can.
And use the tools that are out there. So when I worked with IMS applications, right, everything was in JCL jobs. I had a DFS job to dump a segment, right? I had another job that would print out a structure of a database so I could understand it. It was all JCL and it was all text-based. You don't have to live that life anymore. So, I mean, we couldn't browse data on an IMS segment. We had to dump it off and do a dump of it and look at the printed paper. Those were the old days. Now you have things like the file A for IMS, where you can look at a segment, you can alter that segment, you can create test data. You have things like, I'm sure there's others, but the BMC one, the change manager for IMS, it's a web-based app. You can go in and create all the changes. You can look at the mapping of your IMS segments. You can look at how your pointers are all set up. And so there are a lot more tools available for you today. So if you're working with a team that's still doing things in the old way, as the new person there, really you should bring in some of those skills that you have on other products and apply them to IMS. And I think that will be a good way to modernize that environment. Look at also the value of your IMS applications. I mean, there's a lot of them that are core platforms. So look at the value that those applications are providing to your business. And that will also give you a good idea about whether they're going to get lifted, shifted, moved, redone into DB2 over time. So, and I mentioned, I tend to talk about DB2 because the rate of change for DB2 is faster than IMS in the customers that I talk to. May not be the same at your shop, but everything we've talked about can be done with IMS as well. Even if some of the processes aren't necessarily fully automated, it may be that you still have to do a DBA to trigger some things in IMS to do to the deployments. You know, and then figure out what your standard JCL is when you do a PSB gen and your DBG gens. You know, are you doing ACB gens only for online or for batch? You know, there's automation steps that may be different, but it's all good stuff and all automatable today. You know, what I didn't talk about was Zoe on the mainframe. Zoe also opens up some avenues, and there are tons of Zoe presentations at GSE. So if you're going to look at Jenkins, do look at Zoe, because that will also open up some opportunities for general automation, submitting jobs, looking at the job spill queue, aka SDSF. So there's great things that we can do now across the mainframe, very, very similar to what we do in distributed. And really, that's what we want at the end of the day. We want our tools to be the same, the processes to be the same. So the only difference is, you know, my COBOL here, C here, C++ here, Java here, and, you know, it all works. Other questions, Stuart?
No, that is it at the moment, Steve, unless anyone else has questions that they'd like to pop in the chat now. Could you advance one more slide just to remind people the feedback? So session 6AZ, to give Steve some feedback. All of the feedback is being collated and will be passed to the speakers. So every one of them has asked me about the feedback. So please feel free to complete those. And we're drawing close to the end of the GSE. Tomorrow is the last day. I hope everyone's enjoyed the content. It's certainly been exceptional, I feel, for the sessions I've joined. So thank you, Steve, for sharing your knowledge in 2 areas in the last 2 weeks.
I'm having a lot of fun with it. Database DevOps, DB2 quality, SQL quality, great places to be. So if you guys are working with that stuff, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Even if you're going to build your own solution, you know, let me tell you where we made mistakes so you don't have to. I'm happy to share what we've learned.
So is that an offer for people to connect with you on LinkedIn or something?
Absolutely. Connect with me on LinkedIn, and my email address is down here on the, and here's my LinkedIn. So absolutely give me a shout.
Good stuff. Well, thank you very much, Steve. There are no more questions, and we're pretty close to time anyway. So thanks for all the attendees. 6AZ was the session, and have a good day. Speak to some of you tomorrow. Bye for now.
Cheers. Bye.